This is our first responder session, free and open to everybody. It's going to be myself, Codey Gandy, and Jason Gardner on here. We're going to be talking about transitioning, what life looks like after your first responder career. Jason was able to retire from the SEAL teams. I just transitioned from the Marine Corps. So we're going to give a little insight on what we saw and then what we're seeing in this day-to-day life when first responders are getting out. Just some class notes. If this is your first time jumping on, a couple features for Zoom, which if you haven't been able to use Zoom, then I'm really impressed with how you survived the last 2 years. But we do have the chat box down here. If you do have any questions throughout the session, just please write question as you lead in, and then go ahead and put your question just so that Jason and I can filter through everything that's on there. In addition, if this isn't your first time, we do have the option to provide a situational report. That's just something, hey, I got this feedback last session or last month, and you're just updating the group on what you saw. So that's what the chat box is for. Jason is going to kick this off. I'll add some notes, and then we'll just go into some Q&A for the rest of the hour. So appreciate you guys being here. And Jason, the floor is yours.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Or like Cody said, if you're in my time zone, good morning, good day. Anyway, so hey, one thing I want to point out, if you don't know it, our Extreme Ownership Academy used to be subscription only, and now there's a free aspect on it. So you can get on there for free. There's a couple of the different courses that you can do for free and participate that way and see if it's something you want to describe to later. So Cody gave a quick introduction on who I am, but just to fill in a little more detail for you, I did 30 years in the SEAL teams and served at every level of tactical leadership and several levels of executive leadership, and rose the level of command master chief for both a SEAL team and a training command, and then a couple of tactical for deployed as well. So spent most of my adult life in the SEAL teams, and retirement was a huge step for me. And so we've gotten a lot of questions from folks about how to prepare for retirement. And so we decided to kind of dedicate a whole show to talking about doing that transition. And so I'm going to shift gears on you here really quick, but just bear with me for a second. We're going to have a mythology class. Okay. Now, in both Greek and Egyptian mythology, there was this creature called the phoenix. And what the phoenix was this huge, magnificent bird that would live in some aspects of the mythology, depending upon what you read, would live for 500 years, then build a nest, burst into flame, and disappear. And then from the ashes, a new phoenix would be reborn. And so really, it's very interesting that it was both in Greek and Egyptian mythology, because it's a story about rebirth and growth, right? And if you're going to continue to grow in life, it's a constant cycle of the old you dying and the new you being reborn. So, pulling this back to your retirement, when you retire, you're not going to be a law enforcement officer or a firefighter anymore. Yes, that's who you were, but it's not who you are now. And you need to continue to grow. And one of the obstacles that a lot of folks hit is they just get stuck. They get out of the military, they get out of law enforcement or whatever they were doing, and they get stuck in that. And then they're living their entire lives looking in that rear view mirror and not looking forward to the next ridge line, is, you know, what we say in the military. They're not looking at that. They're looking backwards all the time, and it's not healthy. And it's not a recipe for success. So don't get stuck. When you retire, figure out what you're going to do next. So, first off, retirement, it's a slow motion train wreck, right? You typically can see it coming a couple of years out. unless you run into a situation where you're medically retired, and even then that process usually takes some time, it's something that you can plan for and just see coming. So my advice to you is start at a minimum a year and a half out planning. I want you to get default aggressive about the planning, because there's a lot of stuff going on. It's a big transition in your life, and there's a bunch of administrative stuff that you should start thinking about. So what I did when I was getting ready to retire from the military, when I was a year and a half out, I laid a calendar out and I started going backwards on that calendar and figuring out all the things that I had to do. Now, what do we got to plan for your retirement? Well, number one, let's get all your medical stuff in order. Okay. You've been blowing off medical and not getting stuff documented for long enough in your career. So this is when you're going to start making time to go see those doctors and get yourself healthy and get everything that's happened to you while you've been servicing our nation as a first responder documented, because you deserve it. So that's one of the things. And like we all know, with making medical appointments, like I want a medical appointment now, even if I'm hurt pretty bad. A lot of times it takes me a month to get in to see a doctor. That's why I'm saying give yourself this year and a half window and start a year and a half out making these stinking appointments, because it just takes time. It's a huge time vampire. The next thing you want to do is start training your replacements. So sit down and make yourself a list of all these places where you're the single point of failure for your organization. And by that, like, hey, if you're not coming in, who else knows how to do this stuff? Right? So figure out what those things are and then start training your replacements, so the organization can move forward and they can start to serve the everybody else in your absence. And that is going to take time. And, identify a primary and then a backup to that primary of these people that you're going to train up to do this stuff. And that's going to take time too, because here's the deal. Like, as a SEAL Master Chief, being in the West Coast SEAL teams for 30 years, most of my value was my experience and then all these interpersonal relationships that I developed over that 30 years. So when something happened in another unit or over in another SEAL team or another command, I usually knew someone over there. I could pick up a phone and call them, and I developed those relationships, and I can leverage those relationships to help solve problems or move things forward. Well, that's all leaving when you retire. So you need to start reestablishing these relationships for these people that are going to take over your position. So you're going to take them over and introduce them to folks and get those relationships established so they can get everything done. Okay. Now, what else should you plan for? Well, I think a ceremony is really important. I do. And honestly, for most of my career, I thought, hey, you know what? I'll be there on Friday, and then Monday I won't be there anymore. And when it came time for when I was a year and a half out, and I started deciding whether or not I was going to have a formal ceremony, initially I thought no. And then I realized, hey, this ceremony actually isn't my ceremony. It's not mine. The ceremony belongs to my family. It was an opportunity for my parents to come, for me to thank them for everything that they've done. It's an opportunity for my wife and my kids to sit there, because they're the ones that had to sit through the deployments, deal with me when I was coming home from work frustrated, deal with me when I came back from deployments and I was, on a little bit of edge. And so it was theirs. And so it's an important milestone in your life. And these ceremonies are important tools that you use to mark those milestones for yourself and for your family and for everybody you work with. Now, what did I do with my ceremony? Well, I didn't want it to be a big burden to everybody I work with, because you can kind of say, hey, this is the uniform for it. So I'm just like, hey, uniform of the day, whatever everybody's wearing, that's what you wear. I'll be in my blues, but and my dress uniform, but everybody else is just uniform of the day. And then I made sure that dang ceremony was over in an hour. And my retirement ceremony was done in 50 minutes. And it was in the morning, so other people had stuff going on. I wasn't being a too big of a burden on their day, but I'm really, really glad that I did it. And I recommend it very highly that you have some kind of ceremony. And I'm going to push it towards a formal ceremony because I think they're important. And again, they're not for you. This is for your family members and your friends and everybody else. Okay. Another thing I want you to start doing in this year and a half is start figuring out what the heck you're going to do next. Listen, this concept of retiring and going down to a beach somewhere and drinking like some kind of rum drink out of a coconut with an umbrella in it is ridiculous. That's not an opportunity to success. Yeah, maybe you go down there and do that for a week, but you've got to come up with what you're going to do next, because you absolutely have to have a purpose. This is what keeps you moving forward. This is what keeps you growing. This is going to keep you from getting stuck, is figuring out what your next purpose is going to be. And you'll have the benefit of a retirement income for most of us that are retiring, right? So now you've got a little bit of leeway and you can do something that you're passionate about, that you find joy out there. A lot of you have got a second hustle. And so this is an opportunity for you to push into that second hustle. If obviously it's something you like doing with your time, and you can transition over into that. But you absolutely have to find in the military, we advise people, you need to find out what your next mission is. You got to figure out what your next purpose is. And what I'm going to close out with here, and I'm putting it towards the end because it's what I want. It's the last thing I want you to remember about everything I'm saying today. And what that is you need to find a peer group when you retire. Find other folks that enjoy the same stuff that you enjoy, that have the same passions that you have. And maybe it's other retired first responders. Here's what I found. I moved far away from the SEAL teams. So there aren't really any other SEALs other than the ones I see every once in a while from Echelon Front that I work with. But honestly, we only see each other at like musters and things like that. So I had to find a new peer group. And so I'm up here in Northeastern Washington, and it wasn't that hard. I found a bunch of folks that are cut essentially from the same cloth that I am. And as it turns out, there's a bunch of retired firefighters, there's retired Marines, there's folks that like to shoot, there's a lot of outdoorsmen up here. And I built myself a new peer group because I left the one that I was in the SEAL teams, and human beings were social animals. And the worst thing you can do to somebody is to ostracize them, aside from killing them. And that may even be worse, is to ostracize somebody. So, you know, you need to develop this new peer group so that you have other people that you're interacting with, because that's going to stimulate growth, and that's going to keep you from getting stuck. Really look in that rearview mirror, keep looking forward. Now, you know, you can hit up the local junior college. You can, whatever your hobbies are, whether you meet other folks at the gym or fishing, or you know, outdoor stuff is big for me. And then also, hey, social media, for all the bad stuff it's got, you can train that algorithm to show you good stuff. And so, for instance, when I'm looking at Instagram, if I'm paying attention to things that I'm into, like fishing videos or hunting videos, or just like growth videos, the algorithm wants to show me more of those. And so you can train it to show you more stuff like that, and you can find lots of other people in your area or even via social media that are just a positive influence on your life, and it gives you the opportunity to be a positive influence on everyone else's life. I got to tell you, retirement's hard, but it's also really, really great. It is awesome to wake up in the morning and already have a source of income coming in, because it gives you a new source of freedom. And it's awesome to get out of your comfort zone. And I've really enjoyed getting out of my comfort zone and learning new things, meeting new people, and transitioning to the new me that isn't a Trident wearer or a. So with that, I want to kick it over to Codey, because, you know, while he didn't retire, he was a Marine for a period of time, and transitioning out is challenging. So Codey, what do you have to add to that?
Yes, sir. And I appreciate it, Jason. Yeah, so I'm a little different than Jason. I mean, Jason spent 30 years in the SEAL teams. I'm 31 years old. So that tells you the difference in who we are as individuals. Little hobby that Jason had. But no, myself transitioning out, I mean, I have a lot of stuff that I learned on things not to do, and it mostly came from the culture of getting out of the Marine Corps. And it's what a lot of people face. A lot of us, a lot of you, you'll strictly lean on what the department or what the agency has to offer for when you get out there transition period. And I was no different. In the Marine Corps, we have this thing called TAPS. It's basically what transitioning, it sets you up, and it starts this pipeline a year out for when you're about to get out. And they have these certain wickets, certain blocks, checking the boxes you have to do. And for me getting out, that's all I leaned on. And as I was going through the course, I finally understood at the end of it that it really didn't set me up to do anything. It was more checking the boxes for the Marine Corps than it was for me as an individual. So when I got out, I was like, well, shoot, what do I do now? And I have a bunch of things here that I failed to do. And Jason hit a bunch of them, but just to go back over them, look, when I got out, I honestly thought that there was just gonna be a bunch of opportunities for me out there. And the ongoing joke that I typically say when I speak is, hey, I got out and I thought the world owed me everything for what I did. And I soon figured out that the world didn't owe me anything. And I got stuck because I didn't establish this new mission that Jason talked about. Something extremely paramount for everybody to understand is that new mission is critical for you to move on. Right now, you have a mission that you are supporting. You are directly supporting. And that is your community, your peers, those people that you're working for, your family, all that. That is your direct mission. When you get out, don't let that time pass where you don't establish a new mission. When you don't establish that new mission or that new why, that is when transition becomes hard. And that's what I fell into. I thought I was going to have all these opportunities. I was actually trying to transition into law enforcement out here in California, and it wasn't panning out. So this new mission, this new why, it was nowhere to go. And that's when my transition I thought was going to be fun was actually really crappy. So that new mission, that new why is extremely critical. My next part, make sure you have clear expectations on what you're going to do when you get out. like myself, I had very high expectations that didn't align with my capabilities. When you get out, don't presume that just because you were a first responder for 30 years that you're going to go be the CEO of Intel. Because, and the reason I say that, and it's almost a joke, is a lot of people, when they get out, because of the amount of experience of 20, 25, 30 years, all this experience, that it's going to translate specifically to the corporate world. And it doesn't. Some of the stuff that you do will translate, but don't get it in your head that just because I was a police chief or I was a fire chief for 30 years that I'm able to lead a Fortune 500 company. If you do what Jason said and you go down the right path, potentially that is the way, but you're not owed anything when you get out. And I know that's a harsh statement, but if you understand that when you get out, you won't be shocked by the avenues that you weren't able to approach because of what you set up to. Now, in that same breath of having clear expectations, don't undervalue the skills that you have. You've been doing this for 15, 20, 30 years. You have a lot of experience, a lot of skills. Your job as an individual, as a first responder, is to relate those skills to what people in the civilian world are doing. When you don't do that, that's when, oh, he was just a cop, he was just a firefighter. But when you translate it for yourself on what you did to what you were going to do, that is when people understand, oh, actually, when he was a chief, he was able to work with government. He was able to budget for a whole department. And those skills, they do translate if you package them the appropriate way. When you do get out, an option, which I think is critical, is being able to consult to those that are still holding the line. Think of all the experience that you've been able to gather over the last 20, 30 years. And let's be honest, police, fire, first responders, you guys aren't going anywhere. The job is going to be there when you're gone. If it is in your head a thought on, hey, I can still give a little back just in a different capacity, being able to consult in whatever capacity to those that are still holding the line, that is extremely awesome way, passionate way to give back to those, even though you're still not in the career field. My last one, Jason talked about his ability to build relationships towards the end of the thing, being able to pick up his phone. When you get out, the ability to transition, and whether it's strictly to go back and just relax for a little bit, I understand that, but getting into a new job or a new hobby, things of that nature, typically you're going to have to lean on some sort of relationship to get you in the door. I think I can speak for Jason, but Jason and myself, the only reason that we got into Echelon Front was due to the people that we know. And a lot of people, especially hard-headed Marines, SEALs, and first responders, will feel like, hey, a handout or somebody putting their name behind mine is a bad thing. Like, I want to carve my own path. Don't think of it that way. Shift your perspective to, hey, JP Nell, though that knows JP Nell, he just opened the door for me to have a thought towards Echelon Front. He opened the door. Relationship that you've carved out over the last 30 years because you've met a bunch of people. You have these pre-existing relationships. Those that are out, those are still in. Those can open the door for you. And when you switch your mindset to, hey, PJ as a chief, he opened the door for me to come consult. If you look at it, hey, you open this door and now I'm going to do this. And everything I do is a representation of PJ. That's what I do at Echelon Front. Everything that I do, good or bad, is a reflection of JP because he brought me here. It wasn't a handout. I had to do the work. And when you shift that perspective, there is a bunch of opportunities out there. So those relationships, I mean, you're spinning this back to Cover Move, which is the name of the game. I know a bunch of people there's a bunch of stuff on here. Don't be afraid to reach out to former colleagues. It's exactly what we're talking about. The last thing, and we'll open up to Q&A. I'm already 25 minutes in. That new why, that new mission. I love that Jason spun this on the ceremony piece. The ceremonies for your family. Part of that new mission, new why, specifically for what you've done in the past, is going to be giving back to your family. Think of all that. I know you guys have done a lot, but what families go through having a first responder in the household, which I can speak to this because my dad's been a cop for 31 years. Families go through a lot as well. So part of your new mission, new why, is to give back to them. And that's going to be in different capacities. That's spending more time with your spouse. That's putting your spouse's wants and needs as a higher priority than you because you're getting out of the service. That is spending more time with your kids. It's being with the grandkids, whatever that looks like. Part of that why should incorporate those that have helped you get to where you are today. So don't forget that. And there's a lot of stuff. I mean, we could go on this everybody's transition, everybody's retirement is going to look a little bit different, but hopefully listening to Jason, who retired after 30 years, and my inability to transition properly out of the Marine Corps. Some of you have taken just a few things. There's a bunch of stuff in the chat as well to help make you successful when you do transition out. I love this topic because, hey, nobody here is going to be a firefighter, a cop in 50 years. I don't know. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't assume, but this isn't going to be the job for the rest of your life. We are going to have to transition or retire one day.